Welcome to the Millennial Dream Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Moore, and today I'm with Jeremy Levine, political organizer for housing and transportation, Substacker, and forager, to talk about his journey into creating a career and life for himself. So great to meet you, Jeremy. Great to chat.
Yeah, good to be on the call, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's. Why don't you give a broader description of the kind of work you're doing more recently, and then we'll jump into your background.
Great, yeah. So I'm the author of Jeremy's Quarterly, a weekly blog about political movements, land use, government, and sometimes mushroom foraging, and maybe other foraging later. That's a hobby. Professionally, I work for nonprofits in the Bay Area as a political organizer for housing affordability and sustainable transportation. I'm basically a nerd who likes to attend city council meetings and read planning documents for fun.
Riveting stuff.
Yeah, it is when you know what's happening in the documents.
Yes.
It is riveting, but this part of my career I've really dedicated to building housing in the most expensive suburbs in the Bay Area. So I will get into that a little bit more, but more than anything, the blog that I write covers America's housing movement, which is this phenomenon that has exploded really quickly over the last decade. And my volunteering and work life, because I, of course, volunteer and work for housing organizations, because once you're in it, you can't stop, has given me insight into this kind of amazing movement that I think most people don't really realize is going to transform America's built environment, to change how we think about cities and towns and the communities we live in. And among all those heady topics, I'm trying to balance having a little bit of fun. Well, while I write, I most posts, even the wonkiest ones, have a dumb meme that I home grow, and every once in a while, once a month or so, I do a post on funny conversation or some hate mail that I've received about housing. Trying to capture some of the silly parts of being an organizer and an advocate in a place like the Bay Area. So
yeah, kind of, the thing that probably most of the audience would be familiar with if they've ever watched a show like Parks and Recs, the absurdities of local politics that are more common than you would think.
Yeah, I mean, Parks and Rec captures a real phenomenon. I mean,
Yeah.
I once, a former state senator wrote me a handwritten letter that started "Dear Schmuck Levine" and ended "Deploringly yours," and the middle was about as you'd expect for a letter that starts and ends like that. So
Yeah,
housing makes people funny.
people get heated, it's definitely. So yeah, I'd love to hear, about kind of the origins of your work as a political organizer, and also kind of how you've got started in your creative endeavors.
Yeah. So I had a discrete radicalizing experience that turned me into a housing advocate. I grew up in Lafayette, California, East Bay suburb, median home value about $2 million right now. So this is a very expensive, high-cost place. And when I was in 6th grade, a developer proposed a 315-unit apartment complex on a 14-acre site, a bunch of 2- and 3-story apartment buildings. This is an old rock quarry across from the high school, next to the freeway. And I went through middle school, I went through high school, I finished college, and had been working for a few years, and this project had still not received final approval. This is a saga lasting more than a decade. It was covered in the New York Times. It was a foundational case that helped kickstart a lot of the Yes in My Backyard pro-housing
Yeah,
YIMBY movement organizing.
that was Sonia Trauss's first project that she protested on, correct?
It was her first project, and I was in high school when that was happening. I was hearing my friends' parents talk about this. I was interested in politics and I supported housing, but I was not particularly engaged at that time. I was doing high school things. And so when I was locked up at home in the pandemic, I kind of had this epiphany, like, what is a thing I can do to promote social justice? And the answer was to look at my own community, to look at the place that I'm from and think about how that has been a place which has, intentionally or not, excluded people through policy choices. And the number one policy choice that a local government can control is housing. So I went to the Planning Commission website and I saw what was on the agenda, and it turned out that this 315-unit apartment project was yet again, for like its 20th meeting, coming back before the city. And so I thought, here is a way that I can make a difference. Let me see if I can start a group of people who want to approve this project, who believe that there should be more housing in Lafayette. I posted on Facebook. Turned out everyone else, a lot of other people at least, were all locked up at home and very passionate about supporting a project like this, and had just been afraid to say yes because the opposition was so negative and hostile that they didn't believe that there was anyone else who supported it. It turned out there were a lot of people. So I started organizing a bunch of other people, a few of whom I knew, a lot of whom I did not, from Lafayette, got together and started this group called Inclusive Lafayette. And we began organizing to support this project, and that sent me down a rabbit hole where I learned about all the ways in which zoning policies and other housing rules make housing hard to build, and how that translates directly to housing being unaffordable in places like Lafayette, and changed my life. I was doing economic research and thought, this housing advocacy stuff is a lot more fun than doing regression analysis or reading economic history. And so that led me to seek to be a political organizer in the suburbs of the Bay Area. And so that led me to another nonprofit, the Housing Leadership Council in San Mateo County, where I worked with all of the cities in San Mateo County. That eventually led me to Palo Alto Forward. I'd say the frontier of America's housing shortage, a city that has added tens of thousands of jobs and hundreds of housing units over the last decade. And that is what motivated me to write this Substack, because as I was doing this volunteering, working with all these organizations, seeing what was happening throughout the Bay Area, I realized something really amazing was happening. And I alluded to this in the introduction. America has this challenge with its cities, that this anti-growth sentiment that sort of runs through a large portion of how our local governments are designed to operate. And that means that we prevent opportunity. We prevent young families from being able to find a home. We prevent people from being able to move into the community to do the jobs that we're creating. And so they just have to commute from farther and farther away. Which led me to kind of learn about all the people who were trying to fix that and were succeeding in fixing that. And again, the YIMBY movement, the Yes in My Backyard pro-housing advocates are doing this kind of amazing organizing to shift the way that we think about cities, that we don't see them as static places. Rather, we imagine them as places for people, and as people change, so cities must change. So there are all these organizations doing that work. There are so many different individuals, really impressive individuals doing really amazing things in different cities and taking different angles to how they approach solving this problem. And so I wanted to tell their stories, and I wanted to help a casual observer understand what is happening, how this change is happening. I think 50 years from now, people will look back and they'll be like, how did they do it? How did they transform America's cities? I want to be able to answer that question, and I want them to be able to look at what I've written and see that somebody was trying to put those pieces together.
Yeah. And so, in terms of the timing, when you started getting into political organizing, setting up Inclusive Lafayette, was this after you'd graduated from college?
Yeah, I'd been working in economic research for a few years at that point. I went to UC Santa Barbara and was living in Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
So
And that's especially bad housing crisis in Santa Barbara.
like most of coastal California, there's a very bad housing shortage. Santa Barbara has this special problem, especially in the student community, Isla Vista, which was mostly built in the 50s and 60s and has since mostly banned new housing in those neighborhoods. And so you have students paying $1,000 to split a bedroom in a 6-person house with one bathroom or something. It's an insane housing shortage. And so I experienced that firsthand. I grew up in the Bay Area, so I knew housing was expensive, but I was living with my family, so I didn't have to experience that myself. We were very fortunate to have a stable home in Lafayette. The way I got into the movement, I think of myself as like a third wave YIMBY. There were the initial wave of YIMBY organizers in 2012 to 2015, 2016, that kind of arose spontaneously around the country. And this is actually, you're getting a preview to an article that I'm going to write, that I'm in the middle of writing, but haven't yet published.
Nice.
Because there's this narrative that YIMBYism started in 2014, 2015 in San Francisco and radiated outward. And it's not entirely true. At the time that YIMBYism was incubating in San Francisco, it was also incubating in Austin and in New York and in a couple other parts of the country. And even in the Bay Area, there were different cities, such as Palo Alto, that had proto-YIMBY organizations starting as early as 2012, before San Francisco really got its YIMBY organizing off the ground. And so the movement has this spontaneous origin that is often overlooked as housing prices were spiking all over the country. And then there was the second wave, as some of the YIMBY advocates, and I'll give Sonia Trauss her flowers because she was really leading in San Francisco and has this unique dynamic personality that helped bring a lot of attention to what the movement was doing and inspired a lot of other people to get involved in California and around the country. And so there was the second wave of YIMBY advocates through 2020. And then since the pandemic, there's a third wave of YIMBY advocates, including me, who've been inspired to get involved, have seen some of those early wins manifest in real housing, and have had a blueprint to work with in terms and to build upon to organize in some of the harder places to build.
Yeah, and definitely from what you had said about looking at not only changing the laws, but also looking at how there's a culture of no, and that comes down to the word NIMBY, which is no in my backyard, and then YIMBY, for organizers like yourself, is yes in my backyard, saying yes to housing, saying yes to, positive things for folks in the community, even going beyond housing, but primarily focus on housing since that's the most immediate challenge that many cities face in the U.S. And so, in looking at the problem of the culture of no, what are some of the things that you see as the major challenges there and the potential solutions?
It's a good question. If anybody totally knew, I'd hoped we'd have solved it already. There are a lot of sources of the major challenge, and there's still research kind of figuring out the source of the challenge. For a long time, the narrative was homeowners want to protect their property values, and they're just trying to maintain the value of their homes. More evidence, there's a study by David Brockman at UC Berkeley and other researchers that has poked holes in that theory. Urban condo owners, homeowners who are the ones who are actually most likely to see declining property values from new condo construction, is the demographic most supportive of new housing construction, of any group of, urban renters, suburban homeowners, suburban renters, urban condo owners are very likely to support new housing. So that kind of makes the home voter hypothesis, the property value hypothesis, a little less strong, even though some people will say it's about property values if you listen to a public meeting. In my experience, it comes down to risk aversion and fear of change. People have these ideas of what a city is and what it means to have density, who lives in the density, what their habits look like, and what the consequences are. And that includes traffic, it includes crime, it includes shade on your garden, and new people crowding your schools, and
more cars
no longer knowing your neighbors.
More cars on the street, less parking, when you want to invite guests over. I mean, change in the neighborhood.
I could name, if somebody wanted to say, what do you expect people to say at a public hearing against housing, I could make you a bingo card that would black out for sure, because it's the same thing.
The same concerns come up over and over and over again.
Yeah. And that's they're common and they're widespread, and historically cities have not, historically in the last 50 years have not always lived up to their potential and their promise. And so they've created these stereotypes of what they are. Overcoming that fear, that risk aversion, is a process of building relationships, connecting with people who are afraid, and not demonizing them, and being willing to talk with them, and showing what is possible through policy that works. So, for example, ADU policies to promote accessory dwelling units in California were controversial at first when they were first proposed in 2015, 2016. Some of those laws started to pass in 2017, 2018, and led successfully in California to a big increase in the production of accessory dwelling units. And accessory dwelling units.
And just for the audience real quick, accessory dwelling units are also known as granny flats, casitas. They're additional units that can exist on a single family home property if someone wants to have a renter or otherwise. So go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Sometimes I forget not everyone knows all the cool planning terms that we know. The ADU revolution, as it's been called, is not just a revolution in the number of ADUs getting built. Though California went from building fewer than 1,000 ADUs in 2015 to more than 20,000 a year in 2025. It's a revolution in what is politically acceptable, because at one point ADUs were very controversial and people would oppose their neighbor building an ADU, and now they're broadly accepted. It's legal to build ADUs, and almost nobody complains about it anymore.
And not only
even though it used to be this huge source of drama.
And not only that, you have companies and contractors and construction organizations that are specializing in the construction of these ADUs, and their marketing focuses on the additional value that you can bring to your property, or the additional value you can bring in extra income, extra space for family members. So there's definitely, it seems like there's a shift in the perception from homeowners about, as more ADUs pop up in their neighborhood, as their neighbors talk about it, that there could be that shift in accepting some change. It's not a huge change, but it is a change. It's not the static, unchanging environment that has been the norm for decades in the Bay Area.
Yeah, that's absolutely part of it. And I'll say that, the housing movement's approach, the YIMBY movement's approach, is part of what made this possible. The YIMBY movement worked at the local level and had all these local organizations throughout the state and increasingly the country that were trying to promote ADUs, to normalize ADU building, to work with the industry to do educational training so that they could bring homeowners on board with the process. And at the same time as that local organizing was happening, state organizations like California YIMBY were passing more laws to make it easier and easier so that the process wasn't intimidating and you didn't need years of being a developer in order to navigate what it took to build an ADU so that an average homeowner could partner with a developer and take the project on. So that dual local and state strategy has led to not just a shift in the policy and practice of building, but the culture around what's possible and what people support.
Awesome. And so, when you look at kind of your work and where you're putting things together, what do you see as some of the recent wins and looking forward kind of in that space for solving those problems?
Yeah, I mean, I personally am a bridge builder within and across the movement. So beyond policy, which I'll come back to, I have had a lot of success helping connect pro-housing YIMBY organizations with some of the pre-existing housing organizations, some of which have their root in deed-restricted affordable housing production, affordable referring to like government-subsidized, rent-controlled units.
Yes,
that
an actual
are for lower-income residents.
An
generally.
actual formal definition, not the common parlance of affordable, just as being low cost.
Yeah, exactly. This is a technical definition of what it means to be affordable. That there's before the YIMBY movement existed, there was an advocacy ecosystem that largely formed in the 90s and early 2000s that was about supporting this government-subsidized affordable housing, and also trying to bridge some of the gaps with organizations that do primarily like low-income tenant organizing. They're really focused on like going, often building by building, and working with tenants to support policies that are not always as market-oriented as what the YIMBY movement itself supports. And to help bridge the gap which often arises between the messaging of the YIMBY movement, which is both about housing affordability, but also has this libertarian streak to it, this recognition that not all government policies are helpful for the people, even that they're ostensibly supposed to help. And so the zoning rules that control where you can build housing, the public input permitting processes that mean it can take multiple years in order to get approved for a project, the building codes, and so many other features of our current housing process don't actually lead to better outcomes in what's produced. And that bridging that gap in communication that has sometimes arisen between those organizations has helped get support for state laws that might not otherwise be able to pass without a more united housing movement behind them. So locally, I can say we've had success supporting projects across the Bay Area and changing zoning policies across the Bay Area. Those have largely been positive but incremental changes. The bigger changes are when we can build support for state legislation, but that all starts locally. It starts with building these local relationships and local coalitions and bringing in more supporters at the local level to support elected officials who want to see change. And that ultimately bubbles up to pass big laws like SB 79, a state law that recently passed in California allowing more homes near transit. I was but a small part of a statewide group of people who helped pass that law, but that's something that I think everyone who was involved is going to be proud of for a long time, because it's a really historic accomplishment and a shift in what's possible to pass in a place like California.
I think the recent estimate of how much upzoning occurred, at least what I saw for the city of Los Angeles, was a doubling of available housing capacity potentially for the city of Los Angeles, just specifically, and it affects multiple counties in the state of California.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a doubling in Los Angeles. It's probably more than a doubling in San Mateo counties, where the suburbs that I work in that have been low density and very skeptical of housing historically. It's a really significant shift.
Yeah, definitely. So big wins, but also that focus on creating community and community level organizing and bridging together those different organizations. I think that's really valuable for folks to look at. I've written about it on a number of my posts in the past of focusing on that kind of community engagement, and something I'm seeing in terms of the YIMBY movement moving forward is looking at, okay, so say hypothetically we solve housing. Housing is cheap and abundant in most major U.S. cities. Then the question is what are the other barriers? Are there barriers to creating community itself? Are there barriers to starting small businesses? Are there other types of things? And I live in Austin, Texas. We're starting to see some inquiry into those questions when it comes to especially small business formation, small retail, basically neighborhood cafes is kind of a common talking point, making those legal in areas that are traditionally suburban or, have single family homes in some capacity. And I think there's definitely interesting areas there that as you start to solve housing, that there's opportunities in other places, so what are some of the things you look at when it comes to the community building side of things? Now, whether that's in your professional career or personally, like how do you view community building?
So I think what has made the YIMBY movement so successful has been that it is not just about getting people riled up, teaching them about everything wrong, and then going to fix what's wrong. The movement itself has been really successful at bringing people together and forging relationships. Ned Resnikoff, who's another blogger, had this post about happy hour power.
Yeah.
The concept that a lot of what has made YIMBYs successful has been that spend a lot of time going to a bar or going to a park and hanging out. And so that's the root of a successful political movement to start, is having community. From a public policy perspective, as you think about how we move beyond housing, there are certain things that are really easily tied to the YIMBY agenda, like permitting for small businesses or neighborhood retail. The same policies that have made accessory dwelling units, granny flats, backyard cottages, casitas, possible to build could be used to make small retail possible to build. The accessory dwelling units, you could also have accessory commercial units, little buildings in a house that allow small business. And similarly, the permitting to get a small business, that it's really aligned and parallel to what YIMBYs have advocated for in housing. There are another set of questions about creating good public spaces, plazas or parks or places that people can spend time in, creating public transit that is reliable and fast, and people feel safe on it. It's clean and a high quality riding experience, for example, that are going to be really important to creating really good cities and have not yet unlocked the same energy as housing. I think in part because the cost of housing and the salience of housing is much more tangible to more people. It's easy to see homelessness. It's easy to see that your rent bill is $3,000 a month for a one bedroom or something, or even $1,500 or $2,000 a month for a one bedroom. It's much harder to see the absence of public space or the absence of public transit. Most people drive anyway, so they don't even think about how good public transit could be if we really invested in it. I don't think it's going to be one or the other. Like, we make housing affordable and then we solve all these other problems. I think that they happen concurrently, but but that process can't be easily forced.
Hmm.
Like, Austin has built a ton more housing and has started to see rents fall, but it's also been working on a transit network expansion for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
And is finally moving forward with
Hmm.
something and starting to see the opportunity for more transit happen, even as the density is increasing. Like that, you didn't do one and then the other. They were moving in parallel, and there was overlap in the people involved in those movements. Similarly, a lot of the pro-housing people are supportive of expanding transit service or investing in better public spaces. It's just some people say that you can't build housing until you do X, and oftentimes building the political will to do X only happens when you get the people that the new housing brings to make that possible. And when you get the property tax revenue
Yeah.
that the new
Yeah.
housing brings to make that
And
stuff possible.
also, so you've got revenue, you've got the people for political support, but also the people for the actual need of transportation. The density
Yeah.
of people is also needed as well.
Yeah. And the same goes for parks and other open space.
Hmm.
Like it's much easier to justify turning a vacant parking lot into a park if you have a lot of people living all around it
Yeah.
who can walk to their needs and who really just need some open space. So I think that's my answer to a lot of the public policy side of
Hmm.
community. The existence of community writ large is an organic process that, to the extent that it happens, generally is easier when there are a lot of people in a place, public spaces for them to spend time, and the conditions, like the urban planning, like good wide sidewalks and places to sit, like benches, and interesting things to look at, but just like places to hang out. But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, there isn't necessarily a policy that can create those things on its own. Policy can create the conditions for community. And that's a noble and worthy effort to endeavor for, to create the conditions for community. We just should be realistic about how well a government can create the actual organizations and entities that people want to be a part of. That's the people's job, and
Yeah.
they'll do it given the
Yeah.
space.
Government, when working well, is a representation of the local citizenry and the local advocacy that occurs in the city. You know, but also I would ask, kind of to move it in a different direction. You also have some interesting hobbies in foraging, and so I'd be interested in learning more, specifically mushroom foraging. Yes.
I can only tell you so much because, yeah, what do you want to know about mushroom foraging?
Let's stick to the family friendly side of things.
Well, that yeah, it's all family friendly, believe it or not. I'm an edible mushroom forager. I read an NPR article in 2018 that described a kind of mushroom called a bird morel, which
Hmm.
grows in huge quantities after forest fires.
Hmm.
And I knew nothing about mushrooms. I enjoyed eating them somewhat, but I had never heard of anything like that.
Hmm.
And I was already a hiker, already an outdoorsy person. I thought I gotta get in on this. And so I spent a lot of time hiking around looking for mushrooms, having pretty mixed success finding them. And eventually, with time and a lot of random paging through guidebooks to
Hmm.
learn more of the species and hanging out on some of the Facebook groups where mushroom foragers tend to congregate for some reason, Facebook is the platform. I learned enough that I got better at finding them and better at identifying them, and I have only lightly poisoned myself once in all that time. And it was with an edible mushroom. It
Oh,
was
but
with an edible.
yeah, it was still edible, but still, light injury.
Well, you just with wild mushrooms, you don't know what's gonna sit well with your stomach or not. And I ate
Hmm.
a little bit, and it was fine. It's a mushroom called coral tooth, which is a
Hmm.
relative of lion's mane,
Hmm.
and Very, very tasty mushroom. But I ate a little bit. I was fine. I ate a little bit more, and I had some pretty bad digestive issues. But
Nah.
our bodies are meant to deal with this sort of thing, and they're most of the wild mushrooms that I would eat are not going to risk that kind of stomach upset.
Yeah, yeah.
There are just certain kinds where you don't know how it's going to interact, even if it's technically edible.
Yeah, and if someone in the audience is interested in getting into this hobby, what is some recommendations you would make?
I'm gonna say the annoying thing that the experienced mushroom hunters told me when I was looking for advice, which was go walk in the forest and see what you find. There's a cool book called All That the Rain Promises and More, which is most helpful for people living on the West Coast and most helpful for people living in Santa Cruz County because it is written by a guy who lives in Santa Cruz County. But it does include mushrooms that you can find all over the country and information on what environment they grow in, what trees or environments they associate with, the kinds of conditions in which they thrive. There are other guidebooks that are better geared for other geographies. So if you live in the Mountain West, there are certain books for you. If you live in the Northeast or the South, there are books for you. It helps to have a guide that is geared toward what your local environment is, and there's so much variation in what grows in different places that it's worth investing in whatever that guide is. But All That the Rain Promises and More is probably the most famous of all the local guides because it's just really fun and well written and is useful enough everywhere. That maybe the third piece of advice is it is really helpful if you have a friend or somebody who you can go with and learn from. The biggest rule of thumb is just do not tell anyone else where you find mushrooms, generally, especially if someone else shows you the places that they find mushrooms. That's special information that people spend years accumulating.
Yeah.
So
And is that
I have
mainly
places that I'll take friends. Oh, sorry, Michael. Go ahead.
is that mainly to prevent an area from being, say, overharvested?
Preventing an area from being overharvested, I think it's also just like if you find a place where a mushroom that you like grows, then you might want to be the one that gets the mushrooms from the place. There's a certain amount of territorialness. I've never been upset when I find somebody else who has discovered one of my mushroom places. I've only respect. I've done the same to other people, but I have places where I will go mushroom foraging with my friends, and I have places where I will go mushroom foraging alone. And that just depends on your preference and how generous you are, I suppose.
There are similar things, from the hiking community, and I know also surfers sometimes have this as well. There's that territorialness, and also especially with hikers, it comes down to not wanting to overwhelm a location that may not be able to handle, different folks, especially if it's something that's a bit sensitive or difficult to get to, or potentially even, hazardous for someone inexperienced to go to. So it's kind of like there's a no geotag thing on Instagram for a little while among experienced hikers to try to keep certain areas from being overwhelmed by casual tourists, and something where you can dig deeper into community and start to find out things more through personal connections rather than through just a quick swipe on social media.
Yeah, it's a good practice. I think there's, in the mushroom community, there's certainly like the good impulse, preserve the environment, don't take too much. And then there's the selfish impulse, which is I found this spot, I worked hard to find this spot, I'm not just going to give it away to anybody. They should find their own spots if they want it. And those two can coexist, I think.
Yeah, that also reminds me of how there's a lot of folks in the trades that have that feeling when it comes to, new people who are training into it, it's kind of okay. There's a certain amount of hard work that you have to put into it, before kind of giving the easy tricks of the trade. Learn how to do it the hard way. Then here's the quick way how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, anything else that you want to discuss?
Yeah, I would say, now kind of, veering towards, the places that you've lived. What are some things you've mentioned? You've been in the Santa Barbara area. You currently live in Oakland. What are some of the things that you find that you loved about those places? Specific places to eat, drink, or, things that you did, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm a California baby through and through. I've lived in the Bay Area, in the suburbs. I've lived in Santa Barbara, and then I came back to Oakland. So I have that range of experience of kind of being a West Coast guy. Growing up in Lafayette, I was always very appreciative of some of the big regional parks they have. Spent a lot of time kind of wandering around in the hills when I was in high school. And even that when I visit home, that's what I return to more often than not. In Santa Barbara, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's a university on the beach with this amazing coastline and really, really idyllic park areas. But Isla Vista itself, the 1.5 square mile community right next to the university, is this super dense student living cluster. And the housing is actually like mostly single family homes and low rise apartments. It's just there are so many students living in those places. It's super overcrowded, meaning they're like two to four people a bedroom normally. But that proximity of everyone in 1.5 square miles means that you can bike everywhere, you can walk to your friends in 10 or 15 minutes. It's just such an amazing environment to be a student, and I don't think there's anywhere else quite like it in the world in terms of either like a student neighborhood or even an adult neighborhood that has that level of density in the way that it expresses itself in Isla Vista. Like the closest thing I can think of is like the stereotype of Brooklyn or Manhattan or something. Like it seems like there's just so much social life in those places because you can have so many people living all right around each other in really close proximity. And the really high quality transit there makes the distance shorter if you want to like hop on the train for 5 minutes to see a friend. In Oakland, there's so many things to love about Oakland and the Bay Area in general. There's a lot of hidden spaces, third places that you often wouldn't see just like walking down the street. And there's a particular bar I'll plug called Baba's House, which is a restaurant with a speakeasy in the back. And if you went in, you would not realize necessarily that behind the restaurant, there's like a whole event space and mahjong den and karaoke stage, just all these things happening there that make it really special. But that's a area that I am particularly fond of. But just living in Oakland, I mean, it's the closest that I have experienced to Isla Vista in my limited experience living places. Like I do have a lot of friends that I can walk or bike to within 10 minutes, and that is really only possible in an urban environment or a place that is extremely dense, at least. So it makes a big difference in terms of how much I get to see people and spend time with my friends, and it gives me a lot to write about. I mean, a lot of what I write related to housing is partly inspired by like what I see in Oakland and also the rest of the Bay Area, which I spend a lot of time kind of moving across the Bay because since I work in a different county, I work on the other side of the Bay actually, and so seeing the different neighborhoods and sort of the moving from the urban to the suburban places, and in Lafayette, where it's even like it's suburban, but if you go deep enough into the hills, it almost gets rural.
Mm-hmm.
Like 40 minutes from San Francisco,
Mm-hmm.
35 minutes from San Francisco, if you go deep enough into the hills. Uh, and just that range of built environment is it's good food for thought on how to write about policy and write about politics, since those places, they're all technically democratic, but
Mm-hmm.
they have completely different local governments in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of different ways.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy, for joining on today's podcast. For the audience, where can they find you online?
The main place to find me online is Substack at this point. Jeremy's Quarterly. If you look it up, that's the blog I'm writing. The name is a joke in my heart because I'm really trying to publish weekly and occasionally twice a week. So uh, it's normally 2 pieces a month about
Mm-hmm.
some deep dive into the housing movement, into a political thing that's happening, into how to make our governments, our local governments especially, function better, and then 2 pieces that are more lighthearted, wrap up of things I've been reading, not an expose, a showcase of my favorite hate mail. I mean, I think tomorrow I'm going to publish. This will be a few weeks before this episode comes out, but I'm going to publish a thank you note that I wrote to myself, which is a little bit that I've been doing for the last few years. A good mix of wonk housing things, and then I think just a little bit of silliness.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure
Yeah.
chatting today, Jeremy, and I hope you have a great rest of your time, and we'll get this podcast out soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to hearing it, Michael.